Well, good morning. This is Val Campbell, and this is the Saturday Morning Show. And I want to take a few minutes this morning. Excuse me, just a minute. Never fails, right? You do all that prep work and you get your hot tea, and then just when you start talking, you have to clear your throat. So I want to take a few minutes this morning and just share an idea with everybody. And this idea is that you don't have to rely solely on employment for your income. And you also don't need to start some big involved business. There's a middle ground, and this is often called a side hustle. You don't have to set up a separate corporate structure. You don't have to set up any kind of a separate identity. It can just be you as a sole proprietor, as it will. And you don't need inventories, and you don't need, office space and all of those kinds of things. You can use the internet, and you can create an income stream built around some area of interest that you have. It could be a hobby. It could be something that you want to start doing. Maybe it's not even something you're really active in right now, but you have an interest in it, and you can develop that as you go along. And I want to talk about that in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about this great week that we had. Oh, I think I'm going to mute my phone because it says we're going to be in the Saturday morning show. So, there we go. What a busy week this was. Of course, we had a vice presidential candidate debate, and obviously both sides decided that they won. And I always find that that's so interesting that no matter what happens, each side starts spinning everything. But I did find it very, very interesting that one side of the stage blatantly lied about so many things. And if that offends you, I'm sorry, but it's just, it interests me. And I say that not just purely from a partisan standpoint, but I say that with the idea that it always amazes me when these people go live or they're in some situation and they say things or do things and they think they're not going to get recorded. Nobody's going to fact check them, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, what happens is the fact checkers, whoever those people might be, run right out there and they say, well, this person did this, and this person did this. Of course, the fact checkers are biased themselves in most of these cases, right? I mean, it's so obvious. And yet, at the same time, you and I, because of the internet, we can be our own personal fact checkers. It's not difficult. And most people, I think, do that. So why do they even have the fact checkers? What is the purpose of the fact checkers? Well, it's because they want to spin the thing one way or another. So it's just the whole thing is somewhat ludicrous to me. But it is pretty easy to sort out these issues and these situations. But apparently, most people don't. It's really an incredible thing to watch what's going on in the United States. And of course, then it comes down to, a lot of social unrest. And I noticed this week that there was a big headline. The National Basketball Association next year, they're not going to do social, what do they call it? Social awareness stuff. They're not going to do any of that demonstration stuff on the courts and things like that. Well, it just seems that nobody's watching the NBA anymore. They just tuned out, and people don't really want to be preached to, and they've got every right to if they want. But I've got the right to not watch because I just get full of it. I just want to go someplace and be entertained and watch something fun. I don't want everything to be about pounding a message into my head. And I saw some kind of a post or a meme or something, and it said, I'm trying to get this right. It said, When I go to the circus, I don't want to be preached about politics. I just want to watch the clowns juggle. So juggle, clown, juggle, or something like that, right? The idea being is that there's a time and a place, and you can speak your mind and say your piece outside of your professional situation. But the people who are paying for your time, the people who are there simply to be entertained, they don't want that there. They might even agree with your message, but they don't want it polluting their free time and entertainment. That's where they go to reduce the stress, not add to it. So I thought that was very, very interesting. Of course, the NBA finals are this week, which is all polluted, if you will, by the whole coronavirus fiasco. And bluntly, nobody's watching it. In the history of the NBA finals, which goes a long ways back to where there was hardly anybody watching television like they do today. These were the lowest numbers of people ever watching. So I think the public sent a message, and I'm thinking, I haven't heard for sure, but I'm thinking the National Football League, the NFL, is kind of getting some of the same message, perhaps, because I know their viewership is way, way down. So you've got that situation. That's really interesting. And then, of course, you've got the whole coronavirus situation, because a week ago, roughly, President Trump and a bunch of his staff contacted coronavirus. And, of course, as many of us anticipated, he was a little bit sick for a couple of days. Wasn't too big of a deal. They, of course, being the president of the United States, if he gets a cold, they got to take him to Walter Reed. That's policy. That's protocol. Doesn't make really much of a difference what it is. He's got to go to the hospital because that's a controlled, secure environment, right? And there's a lot of legal and political reasons for that don't have anything to do with having a bug, right? But in this particular situation, of course, instantly everybody leaps on this with their own opinion, and they start creating policy statements about this. And of course, I saw people on social media saying, yes, he was foolish and he's risking the lives of a lot of people. And now he's in there fighting for his life. And I of course, I answered back and I said, what fighting for his life? He was doing live broadcasts, every day. And he had a little bit of congestion. And in the first couple of days, he had a slight temperature, I guess. But anyway, the point being is the overreaction to this entire virus event. And I want to be clear that I say here that some people have lost loved ones, and I'm sorry, and I understand. I am not making light of that. I am simply saying that we don't have the same visceral and emotional response nationally, internationally, when people die from the flu or in an automobile crash or from any of a number of other things. I had a message from a friend of mine in the Philippines last night. I was talking to him, and I'm tearing up about this just as I speak. There was a 17-year-old girl in their town, wasn't one of my family, but in their town, that killed herself because she was so stressed about the lockdowns and her grades in school and not, feeling like she could see her friends and things like that. 17-year-old girl is dead. And this is sadly and tragically something that is happening all over the world, where we've got young people experiencing so much stress and anxiety over what is being put on them because of this event. They are literally ending their life. And the world isn't having that kind of lock everybody down and shut the doors response that they're having to a coronavirus event. And when you look at the numbers, you just purely look at the numbers, this coronavirus event has roughly the same kind of statistical mortality that you have from driving cars. And it's a complicated subject, and you've probably heard me posting on this and sharing some of the actual statistics from the Center for Disease Control. But these numbers are being tremendously misstated, and purposefully they're being recorded wrong. And all I can tell you, more about that, because that's not really what the show is about today. But I read an interesting piece about this, or an interesting statement in, I believe, the CDC report. And I'll dig it up if somebody asks me to, but it states there is a lag time in the reporting of mortality from COVID-19, because unlike every other cause of death, which are recorded electronically and hit the statistics within minutes, COVID-19 deaths, all of them have to be recorded manually. Now, why on earth would one type of death have to be coded manually in every situation? I am extremely suspect of that. If you're not, then good for you. But I find that to be very, very strange. The problem here is we've destroyed vast parts of our economy globally, but let's talk a little bit nationally for just a minute as an example. 43 million originally 43 million jobs lost. About half of those have come back. The other half, around 20 million, a statistic I read just the other day, not coming back. 20 million jobs permanently lost in the United States. That is an enormous number. The hotel industry is devastated. My son was in the hotel industry, talking about the major chain that he was in middle management for, had 1,000 hotels that were closed. Hotels with 1,000 rooms, and there were 2 employees in the whole place, just kind of keeping the computer systems running and making sure nobody was breaking in. Restaurant chain after restaurant chain closing. We heard this week that Olive Garden, one of my favorite places to eat, was closing most of their restaurants. I've got a little dog over here that seems to want to send me a message. Never fails. 2-year-olds, right? Kids and dogs. So we have hundreds of industries and thousands, millions of businesses that are closed, and they aren't coming back. And that means we've got 20 million people out there looking for work in industries that are devastated. Now, what are we going to do about that? What is our response? People are looking for work. They're looking for employment, but there isn't employment. You can't get employment if the industry is collapsed or eliminated. Regal theaters, I read this week, were closing their doors. The theaters are closing, hundreds and hundreds of them. They're just simply not going to be in business any longer. And that's triggered by this virus experience, because people have shifted their movie viewing views. Not only that, not only have people shifted their habits, but the content, the movies aren't available anymore. It's not like a restaurant where you can buy locally. You can source your product from different places. A movie theater has to market products that are national. They only have a few places, a few studios that make those products, and those studios haven't been open for months. They have movies that are going to be delayed more than a year in the openings. So some of them are just going out of business. That's millions of employees. The ripple, it's the theaters, the restaurants, the nightlife. So what are these people going to do? The government is not going to be able to bail everybody out. I know that they're trying, And I'm very suspect of that also. What I don't hear being talked about nearly enough in these debates is the fact that the federal government now is sitting right at about $26 trillion in debt, which is increased about 20%, 20 to 30% just in the last 6 to 8 months. And if this next stimulus goes through as planned, that's going to put us right around $30 trillion in debt, from 21 trillion when this event started to 30, close to. That's almost a 40% increase in debt structure that we have to pay for. We have to pay the interest on that. And if, between 30 and 50 million somewhere, if the interest rates ever return to historic average, these are nation breakers. And I want to share some thoughts with everybody as we start this discussion about side gigs, side hustles. We have a tendency to think that what we do today is improved, that we know better, we've learned from history, that we don't do things that way anymore. Our leaders are smarter, our scientists are smarter. I want to remind everybody that it's been within the last 50 years that they quit giving women shock treatments for menstrual cramps, for what they used to call hysteria. That was a woman's thing. Hysteria comes from the same Latin root that created hysterectomy. And women's issues were a thing that doctors used to give women electric shock treatment for. And Geraldo Rivera, a famous journalist, just celebrated his 50 years in the media. I think he's 77, if I remember right. I saw a documentary, kind of a show on him the other day. He broke into the media in the 60s, and his big piece originally was disclosing the horrifying practices in medical clinics and the way that they treated mental illness. It was barbaric. The imagery that he exposed was horrifying. And this was 50 years ago. The history of the world is full. It is the story of failed nations from the mistakes and the stupid things and the corruption of the people that are in power. And there's absolutely nothing that leads us to believe that the human race has made some kind of evolutionary leap in the last 100 years. In the last 100 years, there have been dozens and dozens of enormous failures of nations. The Soviet Union being one of them, one of the largest nations that ever existed on the face of the earth, doesn't exist anymore. It would be naive of us to think that that cannot happen to the United States. That would be really foolish in light of the fact that we sit here with the instrument of that destruction on our table. Almost $30 trillion of national debt. Now, you can say, well, if they want, they can just erase it. That would destroy our currency. You can't just do things like this and not have some kind of a plan to work your way out of it, to solve it. And the only way to do that is to pay it off or overwhelm it with growth so that it becomes a very, very small part. The debt service becomes a very, very small part of your national economy. This would be like you as a family, perhaps you've got $40,000 in credit card debt. Now, if you're making $20,000 a year, that's an overwhelming debt service. And if you could grow your income to $500,000 a year, it becomes practically nothing. You could pay it off within a year. You see what I'm talking about? So if we aren't growing the economy strongly at the same point in time that we are holding down, adding to that debt, I mean, you can't grow it proportional. You're just kicking that can down the road. But that's one way that you could do it. But I see absolutely no political will to stop borrowing money, to stop spending money we don't have. We're borrowing money from our children's future. That's what we're doing. We're doing that so that we don't have to pay for the things we want, the things that the politicians are promising us when they're running for election, just like they are now. Okay, and I'm going to say it. Biden and Harris are the worst of them, but the Republicans aren't much better because they're feeling the pressure to chase these people for who's going to give you more goodies, right? Well, they're promising people all of this stuff: free education and free hospital and free medical and free everything, and a guaranteed income, and on and on and on. Sorry, my nose tickles when I talk. And so the Republicans, on the other hand, think, well, geez, we got to promise people stuff. Nobody's standing up. Well, sorry. President Trump did this week. He actually stepped up and he said, no, I'm not going to vote for that stimulus package that's being talked about because there's too much junk in it. You can't just borrow a bunch of money from on the part of the federal government, because the federal government can borrow money, the states can't. It doesn't work that way. The states can't just print money. The federal government, they can just print money, just send it to the state. The state doesn't have their own money press. They don't make their own currency. So what's happening is that the people in Congress are talking about borrowing a bunch of money and giving it to these cities who've been squandering their budgets and overspending and being fiscally irresponsible. And now they're kicking this back to the federal government to bail them out. And Trump finally stepped forward and said, no, I'm not going to pass that. I'm going to veto that. So don't even bother bringing that to me. And apparently everybody thought that was a horrible thing and he's a despicable man. And this became a concern that people might not vote for him because he wasn't, promising them as much stuff. You see how that pressure builds up? So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that unemployment going forward is going to be less and less and less reliable. I have friends right now, today, just talking to one yesterday, brilliant person, 50 years old, brilliant, has been involved in some of the big .com launches, but she's unemployed right now. She's working as a consultant. She's working under contract piece by piece by piece. All right. But you get the idea here that sometime around the age of 50, when there's some sort of an event, corporations look at you and go, yeah, I think we're going to let that person go. We're going to, reduce that department. And then when they go back to hiring back up, they don't bring those people back. Over 50 is an employment disaster if you're relying on that. Now, luckily, she has enough skills that she can go out and work as a consultant. Not a lot of people can do that in that way. I'm going to show you a way that you can. Excuse me for just a minute. I guess I have to go let my dog out. It never fails, right? This is just one of those mornings. I tried to get them to go out earlier, and they just weren't having it. They didn't want to get out of bed yet. It's raining here. There was a big storm last night, and the dogs know that. Of course, they don't want to go outside when it's wet and cold, just like you and I wouldn't. So we were talking about this idea of consulting. And if you are a highly technical person, if you've got extreme competency in fields, you're probably always going to be able to get out there and hustle your skill set, your expertise, and get contracts from, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, whoever it is, or other companies. I've worked as a business consultant. I worked as a consultant, a technical and an organizational consultant for about 7 years. I just decided I didn't really like that gig. I didn't like being the outsider that was coming in and fixing everybody's problems, because the truth of the matter was I couldn't fix the people. They didn't want to be fixed. They just wanted the problem fixed. So as soon as I fixed the problem, they'd turn right back around and do the problem again, right? You see, and I just got tired of that. But you have skills. I think just about everybody has skills. I just was thinking about this the other day. So I just want to go down this list a little bit. I've done this before, but let's just talk about things that you potentially could do to create a consulting practice, a side gig, right? It's not employment, and it's not creating a big business. It's you marketing your skills. My 2-year-old's calling me again. Well, let's see if they'll give us a few more minutes, huh? So I'm just going down through the list here. Sorry for the interruptions. It's life. What can you say? Live TV. It is what it is. So, side gigs, cooking, sewing. How about a writing class? If you like to write, if you've got some skills in that, you could literally hold an online writing class every week, and people could come and sign up for that, and you'd get paid. Got a little bit of something on my screen right there too. Maybe I ought to wash that. How about tutoring of all kinds? You can literally, if you're good at math, you can tutor kids in math. If you're good at geography or history or all kinds of things, kids are doing remote learning these days. And I think that that's going to continue. There's always going to be, and increasingly, I think, people homeschooling. One of my kids, one of my nieces, sent me an assignment. She was looking for help with her assignment. I'm the uncle that gets tagged with this stuff on social media. Uncle, I have to write this paper. Would you help me? Here's my assignment. And it was kind of shocking, actually. It was really, really blatantly politically postured, right? It was obvious that this was an assignment in writing, right? It was a writing assignment, but it was structured so that they had to address a subject in a way that was asking them questions about their opinions on social aspects. And I looked at it, I said, man, if my kid brought something like that home, I'd be really ticked off. Okay. Because it's not about, it's obvious that the thing becomes about socially engineering your child, not just teaching them to write. In the process of that, they're going to get engineered down a certain line of thinking. And I just object to that. I don't think that that's the place of a school to teach morality, to teach their morality to your kids. Okay, my opinion. Now I will say, unless you specifically place your child in a school to have that function, right? But that shouldn't be public school. That's part of the problem we're dealing with today. All right, so yoga classes. How about bicycle repairs? There's a lot of people out there that have bicycles that would, maybe love to spend $10 or $15 to attend a bicycle repair class. You could keep going. Brad and I talked last week about the fact that he's got a new Blackstone griddle. Cost him a couple $100. He's been telling me about that griddle for weeks and weeks. How much he loves it. I cooked this on it. I cooked that on it. This was so great. I've got omelets down, right? If Brad's watching this, he's probably laughing. It's awesome. Here's the thing. You could pay a couple $100 for a Blackstone grill, or if you've got a barbecue or whatever, you can literally do demonstrations and classes on cooking on a griddle or cooking in your your home, in your kitchen. You can get devices to hold your phone. I've got a number of them because obviously I do this kind of stuff all the time. But one of them I have sits there and it's on a little pedestal. It's battery operated and it'll follow you. It's the coolest thing. It wasn't very expensive. But literally it holds your phone and it will follow you as you move. So you can have it in your kitchen, and as you're moving back and forth cooking, the phone is following you. It's cool. These things don't cost much money. They're available on Amazon.com. My point being is that anything that you do can become an opportunity for you to be a consultant. Well, how are you going to market this? Okay, you can put up a website and you can go on Facebook and market it, get a Facebook page, and you can do all those things, and that's going to help. Okay, I suggest doing all of those things. But specifically, how are you going to handle your credit card payments? Because it's going to be online. You're not going to be having people send you checks. You want some ability for them to come in and put their credit card in there and charge it $10 or $15 or $50, $100, whatever it is, the value that you've established for your service, for your consulting. And by the way, it could be consulting. It could be business consulting. It could be tax consulting. It could be all kinds of things, whatever your area of expertise is. But anyway, you got to have some way of managing your calendar so people can book into your events. You've got to have some way of managing all of this, the businessy side of things. Is that a word, businessy? The administration of your side hustle, because you've got to have that. You're going to have income. You're going to have some way of getting a printout of what that is, so you can look at it and figure out where your best revenue is coming from. Make decisions like that. Well, that's the reason why jewelbook.com was created. Is it does all of those things. It handles the administration aspects of having a side hustle, a consulting gig, so that you can just focus on doing that thing you like to do. And I love the idea when I first saw it, and the CEO asked me to take a look at the website and help her with some ideas and things, and I just fell in love with it. I just think it's a brilliant concept. And so this allows people to develop a consulting business, a consulting practice. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. A consulting practice. And you can market any kind of a business through there. You could be a plumbing contractor or a painting contractor or whatever. You could be a retiree looking to develop some side income, some supplemental income, but also looking to develop some tax deductions. You might be a retiree that likes to travel and has an RV. Well, you can convert that life experience, that lifestyle, into a business and tax deductions. There's a lot of things that you can do where you're traveling from place to place, maybe doing research for your blog site and your webinar practice, your lessons. There's so many things that you can do. It allows you to be so creative, and it allows you to move away from requiring somebody else to give you something, a job, or some government check. You can take control of your own life. You have the ability to be the person making those decisions about how much money you make and where you make it. And just like some businesses today, some jobs, does it mean, if you've developed your side hustle to the point where it's your main hustle, you can live anywhere probably, right? You can now move, if you're in a city and expenses are high, you can move to a smaller, town. As long as it's got an internet structure, you can even take it on the road with your RV. I've thought about this myself in the years to come. There's so many opportunities. So let's talk about the numbers, because maybe people aren't really familiar with how this works. You can establish what you want to make per attendee, per consulting client, per gig, right? So let's just say it's a one-on-one deal, and you look at this and you say, well, that would typically be about $100 an hour. Now, I had a friend that was just talking to me this week about some consulting that they do, and she said the going rate for that type of consulting is about $150 an hour. Okay, $150 an hour. Now she's able to go get a consulting gig, and this is a lot of this is the type of thing that I think many people could do. Now she's involved in IT, so she has the ability to go in and do consulting, right? Because the reason they hire a consultant is just because they don't want to hire an employee. It's a short-term gig, okay? But you can do much of the same thing, but maybe your gig's a little shorter. Maybe it's an hour helping somebody sort through a computer systems problem between QuickBooks and their application online. Something like that. I mean, if you're a QuickBooks expert, you know how to just get in there and help that person structure their time. There's a lot of businesses that would be happy to spend $100 to get something fixed. I will tell you, one time I had a consulting client. I was talking to them. They had $1 million problem. Literally, this problem was costing them $1 million a year. Now, what I did was I asked them, I said, you probably wouldn't want to get that fixed, would you? Well, see what my head's doing? I was going like this, and they're going, yes, I would like to get that fixed. And I said, probably wouldn't be worth $8,000 a month for you to fix that problem, would it? For a year, $8,000 is $96,000. Probably wouldn't be worth spending $96,000 to fix your $1 million problem. They said, yeah, I'd be really excited to that. And I said, you probably wouldn't want to start right away, would you? And they said, yes, we'd want to start immediately. And boom, they paid me $8,000 a month on a year contract to fix this problem for them. And quite honestly, it only took me a couple hours a month. The problem wasn't the time. The problem was the $1 million. It wasn't, that was the value. The value is $1 million. For $100,000, for $96,000, I fixed $1 million a year problem for them. So, I'm just sharing with you that sometimes people will spend a lot of money because they've got a very expensive issue. So you can charge, depending on what it is, of course, you're not going to charge $100 an hour for a cooking class, but you're going to be able to get a lot more people for that cooking class. So there's many different things you can do depending on, and I'm broadcasting out here to large numbers of people, but let's just say that you had a cooking class. Now, there's almost an infinite number of dishes that you can cook of all the different cuisines, right? You've got French food and Italian food and British food and American food and Mexican food and Thai food and Filipino food and Japanese food and, and Indian food, on and on and on. And within each one of those cuisine cultures, you've got dozens of potential dishes. And if you enjoy cooking, if you're good at following recipes, I'm not. I'm really good at throwing a bunch of stuff together. Ad hoc cooking. I couldn't follow a recipe, I don't think, to save my soul. I could, but you get my point. I'm real good about, well, let's throw some of that in there. That'd probably be good. And usually it turns out great. But the point being is, you could start a cooking class online. Now, let's talk about how this might get built up, because it's important for you to understand how this works. I think if you're thinking about this, at first you're not going to have very many people there. Well, partly because jewelbook.com is a new website, and this is going to get built up. In a couple of years, this is going to be a big deal. But you're going to be talking to friends on Facebook, and you're going to be doing some marketing like that, social media, outreach. And at first, maybe you've only got a few people showing up. Okay. But let's say you decide that you're going to charge, let's say you decide that you're going to charge $12 per person. And you've got the ability for them to charge in a credit card through the website. You can direct them there, by the way. Let's say you were a member of jewelbook.com, which is free, by the way, free to join. And you direct them, your clients there, say, hey, I booked through jewelbook.com. You go ahead and go over there and get a membership and go in there. And here's my link, and you can book into my class. So let's just say that you're charging $12 per class. Okay. Now, Jewelbook on a free membership, they charge a percentage. Okay, so some of that money, some of that $12, it's 20 to 30%, depending on the way you have your membership. Jewelbook.com takes that as a fee for handling your credit card payment and booking and the cost of the website and for the marketing that they're going to do for you. And just as an example, one of the things that they just are starting right now is a free blog site, a community blog site. So you can literally blog into this community site and use that as your blog, and they will promote that to all of the Jewel Book members. What an awesome thing. When I heard that Hong Lee had decided to do that, I thought that is a really, really cool idea, because a lot of people would like to have a blog. They'd like to have some place that they can write some things occasionally, but they don't want to write so much content to support an entire website and the administration of a blog site, et cetera, et cetera. Now you have a free blog site as being part of a member of jewelbook.com, and it is communal. So everybody's going to be active in that. This is a fantastic feature for a free membership. Okay. So let's just say $12 a piece. I'm going to write this down. Okay. $12 a piece. Let's just say that in this weekly class. Now, you're going to cook something anyway, right? Have some fun with this. Learn to cook a new dish. Get your recipe. Go through this. You now consult with your tax person, right? Your part of your cell phone bill can be deducted. Your internet bill, possibly. The ingredients for the meal can be deducted because you're teaching your class. So you are going to get a tax deduction out of this if you're doing this right. And you are going to cook a meal, and then you're going to eat the meal. So this is win-win for you to start with, because there's not many people showing up the first few weeks. But let's just say that in 4 months, 16 to 18 classes, you have 100 people attending. It looks like we just had some internet disruptions, so I'm going to repeat that. So at $12 per person, in 4 or 5 months, let's say you've got 100 people attending, that's $1,200 per week. Jewel Book takes their cut for administering yours. So, and then you've got some ingredients and things for your class in this example. So let's say you're netting here $900 a week on your side gig. Now there's 4.3 weeks in a month, 52 weeks in a year, right? So 4.3 times 900, you now have a side gig that before tax is somewhere around $3,500 to $4,000 per month in a side gig. And what happens then as word gets out and you have this popular show and you're getting better and better at it? And what happens if that 100 people becomes 1,000? Well, now that $3,500 a month becomes $35,000 a month, 10 times. When you think about what the potential is, because 1,000 people per week attending a popular event is nothing online. I personally know events that have 20,000 people attending. So this is potentially a huge deal. It's going to take a little bit of time to get built up, but why not? What do you have to lose versus what you have to gain? What you have to gain is everything, and there's no risk to this. You're not putting out any capital. You've already got a phone. Maybe you pay $20 or something like that, maybe, for a little holder to hold it there, so you can do what you're doing. Now, eventually, maybe you get more equipment. I've got a whole studio here. In fact, in our house, over the last 10 years we've been doing this, we literally have 3 studios in our house. We have so much fun with this. This has become our hobby. Ems and I both. She was outside grilling sausages the other day on our grill, and she's videoing this and then turning that into a YouTube stream. And we do this stuff out of fun. So we've learned how to do this, but it took us some time. When I first got started, it was me and my phone sitting under a tree out in the backyard. And I didn't know how to upload anything into YouTube. I'd never done a YouTube. I wasn't a YouTuber, right? So I went and got a channel. And honestly, I learned some of this by listening to Jessica Higdon and Lisa Irby and a few other people online. I went into YouTube and started doing some searches. And I learned a lot of the stuff that way that I now teach all of you. So I learned from the best of the best. And I passed the best of that on to you folks. But that's how I started. I just went out, and I didn't have a studio. I didn't have anything, but I had a tree out in the yard. The weather was pretty good. And I just went out there and started doing videos. And then they were pretty bad at first. I went down to the beach over Alki Beach in Seattle. I went down there and watched a volleyball game one afternoon, and I did some things. I'm just practicing. So it can be fun. You can learn to do this. But my point is that social media influencing is a huge industry today. Didn't even exist 20 years ago, did it? Nobody heard of a social media influencer. Do you know that today, one of the top career choices among high school students, when they ask these kids, they're going to go on to college, what career do you want? One of the top choices is social media influencer. The freedom and the ability to control how much money you make and own it, not have to go through these kinds of things. Kids are smarter today than they were in the past. When my dad, was a kid, the whole thing was just to get a job, get a job, work for a company your whole life, maybe start your own company. But that was it. There was no real idea of, there was no internet. There was nothing. This whole thing with the way we live and what we experience today, that was science fiction to my father. Really, Buck Rogers, right? That was all science fiction. So I'm encouraging everybody to take control of their life, take control of their income stream. Don't be subject to what somebody else is willing to give you and then take away. Take control of it, okay? This is Val Campbell. If you have any questions about this, if you have any concerns, thoughts, questions, you want to just brainstorm on what in your life can become a side gig, a side hustle, what in your life can become a consulting practice, that's what we're talking about. Get a hold of me. Send me a message on Facebook. Send me an email if you've got mine. And reach out to me and talk. I'm happy to spend time with you and help brainstorm with you on what you can do in your life to take back control and make your future more secure financially. Okay, this is Val Campbell. Have a good Saturday.